Your cat is sitting somewhere in your home right now, maybe on the couch, maybe on the exact spot on your desk where you're trying to work. It is looking at you with an expression that contains simultaneously complete indifference and the quiet assumption that you will feed it in the next 20 minutes. You probably think of this as normal pet behavior. You probably think of your cat as something you own, something you chose, something that lives in your home because you brought it there. Here is what actually happened. Your cat chose you, your species specifically. 10,000 years ago, cats identified humans as the most useful organism on the planet and began a process of calculated infiltration that has resulted in 400 million cats living inside human homes worldwide, fed, sheltered, medically treated, and emotionally attached to, all without performing a single reliable task in return. Dogs were bred over thousands of years of selective pressure to follow commands, herd livestock, guard property, hunt alongside humans. The relationship was negotiated across generations of human control. Humans decided which dogs reproduced. Humans shaped the animal. Cats were never shaped. They shaped the situation. And the way they did it is one of the strangest stories in the entire history of the relationship between humans and animals. Let's start at the beginning, because the beginning tells you everything.
Around 10,000 years ago, in the Fertile Crescent, the arc of land stretching from modern-day Egypt through Israel, Lebanon, Syria, Turkey, and Iraq, humans began doing something they had never done before in the history of the species. They stopped moving. They planted crops, built permanent structures, and stored grain in quantities large enough to last through seasons. And grain storage does one thing above all else. It attracts rodents. Mice and rats arrived wherever humans stored food, and following the mice and rats, drawn by the concentration of prey in a small area, came the wildcats, specifically Felis sylvestris libica, the African wildcat, a small, striped, solitary predator that ranged across North Africa and the Middle East, and was, by every behavioral measure, deeply hostile to human contact. These were not friendly animals. They were not looking for companionship. They were looking for mice. But the ones that could tolerate proximity to humans, that could suppress their flight response long enough to hunt near the edges of human settlements, had access to a prey density that cats living away from humans could not match. They ate more. They were healthier. They reproduced more successfully. The cats that could stand being near people outcompeted the cats that couldn't. No humans selected them. No human bred them deliberately. The cats self-selected, generation by generation, for a single trait: tolerance of humans. And that tolerance, repeated across enough generations, became something else. It became dependency. And then it became something stranger still. Carlos Driscoll, at the National Cancer Institute, led the most comprehensive genetic analysis of domestic cat origins ever conducted, published in 2007 in the journal Science. By analyzing the DNA of domestic cats and wildcat populations across multiple continents, Driscoll's team traced all domestic cats alive today to a single population of African wildcats in the Fertile Crescent, domesticated in a single event approximately 10,000 years ago. One population, one event. Every cat on the planet, the one on your couch, the one on your desk, the one currently knocking something off a shelf for no reason, descended from that original group of wildcats that decided humans were useful. But here is the part that separates cats from every other domesticated animal in human history. Genetically, domestic cats are almost identical to their wild ancestors. Driscoll's analysis found that the genetic distance between a domestic cat and an African wildcat is smaller than the genetic distance between different wolf populations. Dogs have been genetically transformed by domestication. Their skulls, their behavior, their hormonal systems are dramatically different from wolves. Cats are essentially wildcats that learned to tolerate a specific living situation. They were never fundamentally changed. They changed their circumstances instead, and the tool they used to do it is something you have almost certainly heard and never thought carefully about: the meow. Adult cats almost never meow at each other. Kittens meow at their mothers when they need something: food, warmth, attention. But once a cat reaches adulthood, vocalization between cats drops dramatically. Cats communicate with each other primarily through scent, body language, and facial expression. The meow, as an adult behavior, is functionally absent in wild cat populations, except around humans.
Nicholas Nicastro at Cornell University spent years studying cat vocalizations and their effect on human listeners. What he found was this: cats have developed, through living with humans, a specific repertoire of vocalizations that are acoustically calibrated to trigger human response. The frequency range of a cat's meow overlaps significantly with the cry of a human infant. Not exactly, but closely enough that human auditory processing, which is exquisitely tuned to detect infant distress, responds to it with urgency. When your cat meows at you, it is not using a natural vocalization. It is using a sound it developed specifically for human ears, engineered over thousands of years of interaction to produce a response in you that you did not consciously choose. You feel something when the cat meows, a pull, a sense that something needs attention. That feeling is not an accident. It is the result of a 10,000-year optimization process that you were not aware was happening. The cat is not asking, it is pressing a button, and the button works. But the meow is only one layer of this. The deeper layer is the purr.
The purr is one of the most studied and least understood vocalizations in biology. Cats purr during contentment, but also during stress, during illness, during recovery from injury, and during the final stages of dying. The purr is not simply an expression of happiness. It is something more complex, and researchers now believe it may serve multiple functions simultaneously. Gary Weitzman, a veterinarian and author who has spent decades studying animal communication, describes the purr as one of the most effective bonding mechanisms between species ever documented. The frequency range of a cat's purr, between 25 and 150 hertz, falls within the range that has been shown in clinical studies to promote bone density, accelerate wound healing, reduce inflammation, and lower cortisol levels in humans. Sitting with a purring cat produces measurable physiological changes in the human holding it. Blood pressure drops, heart rate slows, stress hormones decrease. A 2008 study at the University of Minnesota found that cat owners had a 40% lower risk of dying from a cardiovascular event than non-cat owners over a 20-year period. 40%. The researchers controlled for other health factors. The association held.
The cat is not just emotionally bonded to you. It is, at a physiological level, good for you. And the humans who kept cats lived longer and had more descendants than the humans who didn't. Over 10,000 years, that is a meaningful selection pressure. The humans who responded to cats, who let them in, who fed them and tolerated them, and eventually loved them, those humans did better. The cats made sure of it. Now here is the part that breaks the story open. You have probably seen your cat do something that seemed completely irrational. Knock a glass off a table, sit in an empty box for 40 minutes, stare at a wall with absolute intensity at 3 in the morning, attack your feet for no reason, and then immediately act as if nothing happened. These behaviors are not random. They are not evidence of stupidity or indifference. They are the behaviors of a predator whose instincts were not significantly modified by domestication, running in an environment those instincts were not designed for. Your cat's brain is a hunting brain. It tracks movement compulsively because, in the wild, movement means prey. It knocks objects off surfaces because testing the stability and reaction of objects is how a predator assesses its environment. It attacks your feet because your feet move at roughly the speed and size of small prey. It stares at walls because its hearing is 4 times more sensitive than yours, and it is tracking sounds inside the wall that you cannot detect. It is not strange. It is a wild animal running wild animal software in your living room. And here is the thing that researchers at the University of Edinburgh found when they actually tested the personality traits of domestic cats against wild big cats in 2013. The psychological profile of your cat maps almost perfectly onto the profile of a leopard. Dominance, impulsiveness, neurotic anxiety, predatory aggression, extreme environmental sensitivity. The traits are the same. The scale is different. You are sharing your home with a leopard that has learned to meow it in the frequency range of a crying baby, and it has been doing this for 10,000 years. The thing sitting on your couch is not a domesticated animal in any meaningful sense. It is a wild predator that made a calculated assessment of the situation, identified a relationship worth cultivating, and installed itself in it so effectively that 400 million of its kind now live inside human homes, eating food prepared for them, sleeping on furniture designed for humans, and receiving medical care that extends their lives years beyond what they would survive in the wild. You did not domesticate the cat. The cat domesticated the arrangement, and somewhere in that distinction is the most honest description of what cats actually are that you have probably ever encountered. Has your cat ever done something that made you feel genuinely outsmarted? Tell me in the comments. And if you want to keep going, the animals that figured out how to use humans, the ones that built entire survival strategies around our behavior, the next one goes to probably the smartest non-human animal most people have ever interacted with. Crows remember your face. They hold grudges for years. They teach their children to hate specific people, and they leave gifts for the humans they like. The reason why reveals something about intelligence itself that scientists are still trying to fully understand. That is the next one.